let me show you something worth noticing. There's a specific kind of person who never feels quite settled with their money. Not because they don't have enough, and not because they're reckless. They feel unsettled because they can't stop adjusting. They check their portfolio daily. They move money between accounts. They tweak their budget spreadsheet even when nothing has changed. They read financial news not to learn, but to confirm they haven't missed something, and underneath all of it is a single, quiet belief that if they stay vigilant enough, they can prevent anything bad from happening. It doesn't feel like anxiety to them. It feels like responsibility. It feels like what smart people do. But if you watch closely, you'll notice something. The more control they try to exert, the less in control they actually feel. Here's what that looks like in practice. Someone builds a solid investment plan, diversified, low cost, appropriate for their timeline. Then the market drops 3%. They don't panic exactly. They just start wondering if they should rebalance early, or shift a bit more into cash, or read a few more articles to make sure they're not missing a trend. They tell themselves they're being prudent, but what they're really doing is trying to manage a feeling, not a portfolio. And the problem is, the feeling never goes away, because the feeling isn't coming from the market. It's coming from the belief that perfect vigilance equals safety. That if you just stay aware enough, informed enough, responsive enough, you can engineer certainty in a system that doesn't offer it. This belief doesn't announce itself. It hides inside language that sounds reasonable. I just want to stay on top of things. I like to know what's happening. I'm being proactive. But if you trace the behavior back far enough, you find something else. A deep discomfort with not knowing. A resistance to the idea that some outcomes are simply outside your influence. Now, here's where it gets strange. The person who does this isn't failing at control. They're succeeding at the wrong thing. They're successfully maintaining the sensation of control, which is not the same as actually being in control. And the cost of that sensation is high. It eats time. It creates mental noise. It trains you to associate money with constant low-grade tension. And worst of all, it prevents you from ever experiencing the thing you're actually looking for, which is peace. Because peace doesn't come from monitoring everything. It comes from building a system you trust and then stepping back from it. But stepping back feels like negligence to someone who has confused control with attention. You see this in other places too. The person who can't delegate at work because no one else will do it right. The person who over-prepares for every conversation because they don't want to be caught off guard. The person who can't enjoy a vacation because they keep checking in on things back home. It's the same mechanism, the belief that if you just stay engaged enough, you can manage all the variables. But here's what actually happens. The variables don't decrease. Your sensitivity to them increases. You start noticing smaller and smaller fluctuations. A 1% market move becomes significant. A delayed payment becomes a pattern. A friend's offhand comment about their investments becomes a signal you might be doing something wrong. You've trained yourself to see threats everywhere, and now you can't unsee them. And the irony is, this doesn't make you better with money. It makes you worse, because the decisions you make in that state aren't coming from strategy. They're coming from the need to do something, to act, to reassert the feeling that you're managing the situation, and those decisions over time accumulate into a portfolio that reflects your anxiety more than your goals. There's a particular moment when this becomes visible. It's when something genuinely important happens, something that actually requires a decision, and you can't tell the difference anymore because you've been in decision mode for so long, treating every minor fluctuation like it matters, that when something real shows up, you don't have a different gear to shift into. You're already running at maximum vigilance, so you either overreact or you're too exhausted to react at all. This is what constant control costs. Not money, usually. It costs discernment. It costs the ability to distinguish between what matters and what doesn't. It costs the mental space you need to think clearly when clarity actually counts. Now, you might be thinking, isn't it good to pay attention? Isn't it better to be engaged than to be careless? And yes, of course, but there's a difference between paying attention and needing to feel like you're in command of every outcome. One is periodic and purposeful. The other is constant and compulsive. And most people who do this can't tell which one they're doing because the behavior looks the same from the outside. Here's a way to check. Ask yourself, when was the last time you looked at your finances and felt satisfied? Not relieved that nothing bad happened, not temporarily reassured after making an adjustment. Actually satisfied. If the answer is never, or if the answer is only right after you've done something, then you're not managing your money. You're managing a feeling, and that feeling will never be managed because it's not based on what's happening in your accounts. It's based on the belief that certainty is achievable if you just try hard enough. But certainty isn't achievable, not in markets, not in careers, not in life. And the people who can't accept that spend their entire lives in a low-grade state of emergency, scanning for threats, adjusting for risks, and never quite arriving at the calm they're working so hard to create. There's a name for this, though it's not one people use much anymore. It's called hypervigilance, and in its extreme forms, it's recognized as a trauma response. But in its milder, socially acceptable forms, it just looks like being responsible, like being on top of things, like being the kind of person who doesn't let anything slip. And because it's rewarded in some contexts, people never question whether it's helping them. But if you watch what it does over time, you see something else. It doesn't produce better outcomes. It produces exhaustion. It trains people to associate money with stress. It prevents them from ever building the kind of trust in their own systems that would allow them to stop monitoring constantly. And in the long run, it creates exactly the kind of fragility it's trying to prevent. Because the person who needs to feel in control at all times is the person least able to handle the inevitable moments when control isn't possible. They haven't built resilience. They've built a dependence on the illusion of control. And when that illusion breaks, which it always does eventually, they don't know what to do. So what does the alternative look like? It's not carelessness. It's not ignoring your money or pretending risk doesn't exist. It's something quieter. It's deciding once what your strategy is, then building a system that executes that strategy automatically, then stepping back and letting time do what time does. And when you feel the pull to check, to adjust, to make sure, recognizing that pull for what it is. Not wisdom, just discomfort with uncertainty. And then choosing deliberately not to act on it. That's the move. Not doing more, doing less, not staying more informed, staying selectively informed, not being more responsive, being more intentional about when response is actually needed. It sounds passive. It feels passive at first, but it's not. It's one of the hardest things a person can do because it requires you to tolerate the feeling of not being in control without trying to fix it, and most people would rather stay busy. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next.